It's time for Security Now with Steve Gibson, our year-ender episode. And this is a special for all you sci-fi fans. Steve's favorite science fiction, next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Audio bandwidth for Security Now is provided by the new Winamp for Android, featuring wireless sync and one-click iTunes import. Now with free daily music downloads and full-length CD listening parties. Download it for free at winamp.com/Android. Video bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 333, recorded December 28th, 2011, our science fiction special. Security Now is brought to you by Ford, featuring available Sync with My Ford Touch. Sync with My Ford Touch gets you to your destination with integrated turn-by-turn directions and directional arrows displayed on screen. Check it out on the new 2012 Ford Focus and at Ford.com/technology. And by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time and money. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. It's time for Security Now, our special holiday edition. Joining me now from grc.com, Steve Gibson, the man behind the myth, the legend, the man behind Security Now, our security guru, our privacy expert, the author of Spinrite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance utility. Happy holidays, Steve. Did you have a good Christmas?
I did. It was nice. We're having a real cold spell in Southern California, and it was even colder in Northern California. I was up there for the weekend, and of course, I like to start my days at Starbucks, and on Christmas morning, they opened at 6 a.m. So I left the house around 5:40 and hoofed it over to Starbucks, dragging my little, airport wheelie behind me.
It's a Starbucks Christmas.
I was passing cars that were completely they looked like they were in the snow. It was so cold. It was below freezing, and one of the gals, I got there a little early, and she was hoping that she was going to be able to get her Starbucks and get back home before her kids woke up. They were ages 3 and 5, and I said, "Oh, good luck with that. They probably never went to sleep."
Oh, yeah, the worst thing with little kids on Christmas. And of course, now I have teenagers, so we were all in Massachusetts visiting Abby. And we were all staying in the same hotel. Abby came across the street to join us in the hotel, and I think it was 11:30, maybe noon. Finally, Jennifer and I said, this is it. We're going to miss lunch. So it really shifts at some point.
Yes, it does.
Oh, dear. Well, anyway, happy holidays. So you didn't come up here to visit Mom at any point, or?
Oh, yeah, I did for Saturday and Sunday.
Good.
I come up on the morning of Eve and leave on the late afternoon of Christmas Day.
That's sweet. Yeah, we've been having some pretty nice weather up here. I don't know what it was like on Christmas Day, but we've had beautiful weather the last couple of days. So maybe it'll warm up in the Southland.
Last year, I gave Mom her first Kindle, which was the current model at the time. This year, because I had been reading so much, I sort of gravitated toward my DX. And
oh, really? The big one, the giant screen.
Yep, exactly. And I just I'm not holding it up in the air. It is heavier,
right,
but I just like the reflective screen more than reading on anything else. So I thought, I'll bet Mom would like this too. So I tracked down one. I really like the white color, which they discontinued in favor of the graphite, which is a very dark, graphite. I think they do it so that the not quite white e-ink background looks a little bit whiter by comparison.
Oh,
if you're
there you go.
In a white frame.
Clever.
But I found somebody on eBay whose dad had purchased a DX just before the first iPad came out, and he put it on the shelf and never used it. So it was in mint condition. So I was able to get a white one for Mom and verify that it was anyway. So she's in love with it. I've heard from her a couple times.
She likes the DX. She likes the bigger form factor.
Yeah, at 84, the macular degeneration begins to kind of be a problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's easier to read. When I saw the font size that she had chosen for her smaller screen Kindle, I thought, oh, this was a good idea, because now you can actually get 3 sentences on the page. So, yeah, yes.
Yeah, my mom just had a cataract surgery in one eye, and she loves the Kindle for the same reason. The big print. She said, I can read again, which is really wonderful because she's a voracious reader. Right. And Jennifer, who I gave the little Kindle, the new little $79 Kindle to.
Oh, which I really like too.
Love it. Love it.
So small and lightweight.
She's following in the family footsteps. She left it on the plane. So, but here, good news. It's $79. So I guess
it's readily replaceable.
Yes.
We had a really funny cabin attendant. I don't remember whether it was coming up or it was flying up, who talked about how every single flight somebody will leave their electronic gadget, whether it's an iPad, a Kindle, a BlackBerry, a Blueberry. I mean, he went on to he went through this great little pitch that I'm sure is repetitious for him. But he said, however, if you want to recover those, there's a website you can go to.
What?
And he pauses. He says, it's www.ebay.com.
The truth comes out.
To get your lost devices back. So
that doesn't. Yeah, alas.
So,
well, it's all right. It's kind of a holiday tradition, and you're right. At $80, it's a good thing. So, tell us what we're going to do this episode, because we should explain for those of you watching after the fact, the recorded version, that we're doing this on the 28th. Well, it says there on the screen, 28th of December. Most of the Twitch shows are in best of mode, so we reserve this week, and we've done this for a few years, and it's really fun for making best of cut downs of the whole year for each episode, the best of episodes Sunday, that kind of thing. And it's a lot of fun because we let you go to twit.tv/bestof and suggest that. That's up all year round. If you see something you really want to preserve for next year at any point, just go there, twit.tv/bestof, and give us the information. In any event, so we've collated those for most of the shows. However, you and I talked a couple of weeks ago. By the way, thanks to, was it Tom or Iaz who did the show last week?
It was Tom who covered it.
Thank you, Tom.
He's been doing our Q&As lately.
Great.
We noticed that the every other week of Tom was synchronized with the every other week of Spinrite's or of Security Now's Q&As.
Perfect. So we thought this week, because it's hard to do a best of on a show like yours where it's either great in-depth discussions of how the internet works or something. You can't take 5 seconds of that. Or it's news, so we figured, let's make a special episode. And Steve's idea was great.
Last year we famously repeated the portable dog killer episode that was everyone's arguably favorite podcast, even though it wasn't about security news. But I actually did get some feedback from people saying, "Oh, you broke your record of never having missed a single episode." Blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, well, okay, yeah.
You can try to be perfect, or you can do a good job.
And somebody, I would love to give credit to whomever it was, but now I've forgotten. But the recommendation or the idea was surfaced to do a sci-fi show, and I thought, wow, that's a great idea, because there's been so much good feedback about the book recommendations that you and I have talked about over the years. And people have said, where's that written down? Where is that all in one place? And so, okay, nowhere. So I thought, hey, let's do that. Let's do an episode. We'll do a little bit of security news, because there's one important thing I need our listeners to turn off in their routers, which is just come up.
Okay. A
new problem with the most secure technology we have, our WPA technology, involving the Wi-Fi protected setup, which is an ease of use feature that virtually all routers now have. It's all enabled by default, and it turns out it can be cracked.
Jeez Louise.
So we got to talk about that briefly.
Okay.
But mostly we're going to go through all of the books that I have talked about in the past and just sort of put them in context, compare them to each other, what I liked about them, sort of pull all this together in one place for our holiday sci-fi special edition.
I love that idea. I love that idea. So we will get to sci-fi, holiday sci-fi in just a bit, and a bit of tech news, security news, because security news never sleeps.
Nope.
Because the bad guys never sleep. But before we do any of that, the chat room has spotted something. And I think as usual, the chat room is brilliant. You are wearing a Minecraft shirt.
I am.
Okay, you don't tell me Steve Gibson, the king of assembly language program, is playing Minecraft?
No, I don't even know what it is. It's kind of a cool sort of Escher-like.
It's great.
Yeah, impossible Mobius strip thing. So I thought, oh, I like that. I was on Think Geek, and I thought, oh, I'll take one of those.
Well, the story is it's diamond blocks in a game called Minecraft, which is a really popular game right now, written in your favorite language, Java. But the advantage of that is it's portable. It's on every platform, and it's really interesting. It comes out of Sweden. And it was just this guy who wrote this really fairly simple program.
How weird! I figured it was like old school.
It looks old school. It does. Yeah, because it's 8-bit, but it's not. In fact, it's probably the hottest. It's one of the hottest, if not the hottest, games out there right now. Believe it or not. Yeah, and it's kind of. I have it probably here. I could show you, but it's kind of a strange game. You go around, it looks like a first-person shooter, but instead of a hand with a gun, you see a block, which is your hand, and you go around beating on the landscape to collect natural resources. There are a few enemies, but it's not really about fighting enemies. It's about collecting natural resources and building things. And so the natural resource that's on your T-shirt is diamond bricks, which I gather, I'm not a Minecraft player, but I've played it, but I'm not a player, is apparently very scarce and valuable. So that's the T-shirt.
Cool.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Thank you for letting me know what I'm wearing.
Did your mother buy that for you? All right, we're gonna take a break and get to the tech news in just a second. Now that we've cleared up the Minecraft shirt. Before we do, though, I do want to say hello to our friends at Ford. I am so excited. I'm going to have dinner with Alan Mulally in a couple of weeks, the CEO of Ford. Kind of a small few number of us are going to get together with Alan, the Ford CTO, whose name I've forgotten, to talk about the technology in Ford cars. It's really, truly amazing. And we got a couple of Ford vehicles a little while ago to test drive, and I thought what we'd do is we'd get in the car and we'd do a little a video of how these things work, because we talk about them all the time. We never show you. So without further ado, here's Leo, that's me, showing off the nav features in the 2012 Ford Focus.
This week in tech, you know, you've heard me talk about my 2010 Ford Mustang and how much I love Ford Sync. The folks at Ford have just lent me the new 2012 Ford Focus, and this has got my Ford Touch as well as the Ford Sync and some really nice new features, including Wi-Fi. It's got the Ford services, Sync services, and App Link, which allows me to play apps right from my phone. I thought I'd take you for a little ride and show you some of the things it can do. Come on. Let me just show you this screen. I'm going to keep it, I usually keep it on the home screen. You see all of this stuff here very easily, but the point is not to look at this screen or even touch the screen. The point is you're driving down the road, you want to keep your hands on the wheel, your eyes on the road, but I want to, let's say, find somewhere I'm going to go. So I press this paddle here. That's the signal to get Sync to listen to me. Listen. Street address.
In California, say a street address including the city.
140 Keller Street, Petaluma.
Say a line number.
1. So again, I haven't touched the screen. I haven't done anything except talk to it. I'm going to press this button. Set as destination.
Setting destination.
And we're on our way. But let's say we're lost. We want to go somewhere. Destination POI.
By name or by category.
By name.
POI name.
Jack in the Box. So now it's going to find all the local Jack in the Boxes, but there's a number of them, so I could pick which one I want.
Please choose.
Line 1. Set as destination.
Setting new destination.
And now we've got a map, and it's going to walk me through it, and we're on our way to Jack in the Box.
The route guidance will start now.
Thank you.
There's my problem right there. Too much Jack in the Box. By the way, I got email from people saying, "Hey, you went up in my estimation because you played Steely Dan on your sync." And I do like the Steely Dan. So thank you, Ford, for your support all year long, and we hope you all try one today. Drive one, as they say, at a Ford dealer near you.
And the car's voice seemed a little droid-like.
It's
like
a nice lady. She's a very nice lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to meet her someday. I have a little
probably
thing for
will.
her. Yeah. Yeah, because it's not robotic. It's a real human.
Oh, okay.
I think. Well, that's actually a good question. I'll ask Alan. So, let us get you. You said there's some router news. I'm actually very curious about this. What's going on?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, I did want to mention that Firefox released their version 9 of, or Mozilla released version 9 of Firefox, and there was a glitch in the 9.00 release. So the next day, after they saw that it was crashing some people's computers, they quickly updated it to 9.0.1. And you probably saw the news. I wanted to remind our listeners and you that Microsoft has announced they will be adding automatic update, that is background updating, to IE starting next year. So everybody's getting on the bandwagon. Mozilla will be doing it in April with version 12 for some reason of Firefox, but 9 is out. They're claiming 36% faster JavaScript execution for version 9 as opposed to 8, which has, been out for a week ago. And they fixed a bunch of security issues and also released the similar version 9 of their Thunderbird app for email and news. So I just wanted to make sure that our listeners knew that 9 had happened and got a quick fix.
Although Mozilla is taking great pains at this point to say, don't worry, just like Chrome, don't think about version numbers.
Right.
It's just automatic.
We'll take care of all that for you.
Yeah.
Yes. And there was some interesting SOPA news, since you and I have been following this, as have the entire industry has just gone bonkers over this. So the good news is there's been so much fur flying that there's just no way this is going to happen. GoDaddy, that was a very visible supporter for who knows why. It must have been that the people behind SOPA went around and tried to find supporters. They lost upwards of 70,000 domains, exited GoDaddy in an active protest of GoDaddy's support of SOPA.
Yeah.
So GoDaddy quickly backpedaled and said, it's not really what we meant, and
That's BS.
Now,
BS.
Yeah, I know.
Because if you look at SOPA, GoDaddy actually has an exemption. They helped write that law. There is an exemption written into the law that says unless you're a GoDaddy domain. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Fortunately, we moved our stuff off GoDaddy long ago.
Yes. And you remember that I got a short-lived domain. I think I got a wildcard domain when I thought that my DNS spoofability test would benefit or needed for some reason. Maybe it was my version. I think I was developing a site-wide, application-wide versioning system, and I was going to use DNS to do version testing because it was a simple thing. An app could send a query, and so I wanted different domain name or like subdomains. So I used a wildcard DNS certificate that I got from GoDaddy, or no, I'm sorry, not a certificate, just a domain. And what really annoyed me was that they tried to auto update or auto renew that domain after I had deliberately informed them I did not want to be updated. They tried to charge my credit card. And the good news was I had used a PayPal one-time use credit card, so they failed at that attempt. But the fact that they tried to do this behind my back without my permission, I thought, I'm glad I'm not with them. So you
anyway.
also left them.
Yeah, although, one of the problems people have been having is that they're kind of sticky. They have this timeout, which they've changed since people complained about it a couple of days ago. And I got stuck kind of in the GoDaddy web with a few domains, which are still over there. I'm trying to get them out of there. But our advertiser is hover.com, and we've been telling people for a long time to move over to hover.com.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cool.
I may have misstated exactly GoDaddy's presence in the SOPA bill. It may be other. See, I believe the closed domains get redirected to a GoDaddy domain which says closed. But I have to check. I don't want to slander them. I have to check to make sure that they say that they took their name off the list. However, their CEO, Warren Edelman, said, fighting online piracy is of the utmost importance. That's why we've been working to craft revisions to this legislation, but we can do better.
And you're right, I did hear that they were a large participant in the creation of the legislation.
I think they get some benefit from it. In any event, I've told people to get off GoDaddy. As you point out, there's many other reasons it's not the best domain registrar in the world.
Yeah.
And Wikipedia and many others are moving off of it, so that's good.
Stanford Law Review did a very nice piece called Don't Break the Internet, an anti-SOPA and IP Protect IP, the PIPA, P-I-P-A, legislation, which is the Senate's version. I just tweeted the URL at my SGGRC Twitter feed. So I really commend our listeners to check it out. You can get a PDF version from that page. Just the first paragraph of that reads, two bills, and so this is the Stanford Law Review's official position on these two, on SOPA and PIPA, said two bills now pending in Congress: the Protect IP Act of 2011 in the Senate and the Stop Online Piracy Act, SOPA, in the House, represent the latest legislative attempts to address a serious global problem: large-scale online copyright and trademark infringement. Although the bills differ in certain respects, they share an underlying approach and an enforcement philosophy that pose grave constitutional problems and that could have potentially disastrous consequences for the stability and security of the Internet's addressing system, for the principle of interconnectivity that has helped drive the Internet's extraordinary growth, and for free expression. Anyway, the whole thing is really great, and so I would recommend, if our listeners are interested, I don't have the URL is long, but if you just go to twitter.com/SGGRC, it's right there in my feed, because I wanted all of my Twitter followers to be able to check it out. It's just a great read, and I really recommend it.
Yeah, it's been my position all along that what's really happening is a kind of a bigger story, which is that the Internet and computing in general poses such a threat to the current business models for content companies. Current is the important point, that they would like to just kind of disable or break the Internet, break computing, as they've tried to do with DRM and so forth, to protect their current business models. And the future really isn't in those business models anyway. So it's almost like old farts like me saying to the new generation, hey, until we retire, would you mind doing things the old-fashioned way?
Well, and Leo, with Tom last week, I made the point that essentially this is a blacklisting attempt, and we already know that blacklisting doesn't work. if it did, we wouldn't have any spam because we would have blacklisted those 12 bad guys, and that would have been the end of it.
Good. That's a brilliant point. If this is such a good idea, why doesn't it work with spam?
Yeah.
And we know how horrible maps and orbs, all the injustices done by these black hole services that do exactly that and don't work. And that's also been my position, is you can't stop piracy. Pirates are very nimble. They move around. So copy protection and things like SOPA only hamper legitimate, honest people. The pirates are not disadvantaged in the least.
And if we were requiring ISPs to be intercepting attempts to access these blacklisted DNS
imagine
names, there would be a massive growing list. The bad guys would jump over to new names. They would get added. They would jump. They would get added. They would jump. I mean, it doesn't work.
We know this. We know it now. My domain was blacklisted by Maps or Orbs, one of those, for a while, and it meant a lot of people whose. It's funny because so few ISPs now use these black hole spam fighting techniques that it only affected a few. But I got emails from people saying, I don't see your email anymore. And it's because their ISPs did that. And, of course, the ISPs back down very quickly because it often ends up doing things like blocking Gmail, which is kind of a big thing to block. But that's the problem with domain-level blocking.
Well, I got a nice mention in Twitter from a Chris Carter, whose handle is parking_God. So I guess he's good at parking. And he said the exact quote is, quote, "The net interprets censorship as damage and routes around it."
Exactly.
And that was John Gilmore who came up with that great phrase. The net interprets censorship as damage and routes around it.
That's the man who founded Sun and was one of the brilliant original cypherpunks and just a brilliant guy.
And he's an EFF co-founder, too.
Co-founder of EFF. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's right. Anyway, we know. It's just the members of Congress who need a little education.
Well, and boy, I think they
may be learning.
They certainly realized that something happened and it wasn't good.
Whoops.
So, yeah. Okay, so here's our big security news for the week. I need everyone to pay attention to. There was a feature that was added to WPA, Wi-Fi Protected Access, which is our state-of-the-art, very good technology for encrypting wireless links. This thing it's part of what's called the Wi-Fi Simple Configuration, or WSC specification. And this part of it is called Wi-Fi Protected Setup. All major vendors, Cisco Linksys, Netgear, D-Link, Belkin, Buffalo, Zeitzel, Technicolor, they all have WPS, this Wi-Fi Protected Setup, certified devices. And on those devices, this is enabled by default. And this may be something that some of our listeners have encountered, because it's based on an 8-bit pin. So the idea is you and your device negotiate using this 8-bit pin. Now, I am going to cover this in detail in 2 weeks because this is big news. We need to understand what the problem is and how it works. But the short version is, even though this is an 8-bit pin, the way the protocol functions tells somebody who is guessing whether or not you're not even going to believe this, Leo. I know you're sitting on your ball, so I don't have to worry about
you. Can't fall over.
You're not going to fall off your
chair. It might explode, though, with indignation. What?
This protocol tells a attacker whether or not the first 4 digits of the 8-bit pin are correct, separately from the rest.
So that makes it really a 4-bit pin.
Well, what it means is that you can guess the first 4
and it'll correct
separately from the entire 8.
And then and you keep doing it until they say yes. So that's
got the first yes.
Yeah, now I got the first 4.
once you get the first 4, it turns out that the last digit of the 8 is a checksum.
Oh, no.
So that's
you have the
easy.
last digit.
So then you just need the middle 3. and so it turns out that within a couple hours, it is on a router who's got a router that has that has this Wi-Fi protected setup, YPS enabled.
Yeah.
It's possible to negotiate the 8-bit pin or the 8-digit pin and get into the router. So there's a security paper being presented. I've got the whole technical readout on it that is a lot more detailed. I want to do it in detail in 2 weeks. But the short-term immediate takeaway is simply disable Wi-Fi protected setup on your router. It's almost certain that listeners to this podcast are using strong passphrases with their Wi-Fi, because we know that the way WPA can be compromised is by guessing a short or simple to guess passphrase. I would expect none of our listeners are doing that, but if they still have Wi-Fi protected setup enabled, which it is by default on all routers, then this creates a backdoor independent of them having this enabled. So
if you've turned off WAN administration, the ability to log into the router from outside the router,
that does not protect you from
it does not.
It's a separate vector. So you want to turn off Wi-Fi protected setup, which is on by default in your router. We're going to come back to this in 2 weeks, but I don't want to wait, obviously, because what's happened is the security researcher who found it documents it carefully. He is not providing code, but he demonstrates it and has metrics for how few hours it takes him to crack different routers. Some routers do have a lockout where after a number of mistakes, they won't accept anymore, but those lockouts self-expire. So all that does is slow someone down further. Anyway, we're going to go over this in detail. It will be the topic in 2 weeks. But in the meantime, I want our listeners to just go log into your router, and you want to turn off Wi-Fi protected setup, which, again, I'm almost sure no one who listens to this podcast would be using it anyway, because they would know that their gut instincts would say, wait a minute, an 8-bit pin doesn't seem like it's secure enough. And it's not. Turns out it's much less secure than we thought.
This is the time of year when people go visit family and friends. Probably most of them have already done so or are there now. And probably, grandma and grandpa have used WPS because it's convenient. It's a new feature. You push a button, you're secure. If you used it to configure everything, can you then turn it off and remain safe, or do you need to reconfigure?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I'm going to have to take a look at it and understand
next
it
week.
much more.
Okay.
I just encountered this, and I wanted to give everyone a heads up.
So if you are visiting grandma and grandpa this week, turn it off.
Yeah. Do them a favor.
Yeah.
Increase their security while you're there.
Yeah.
Now, for your benefit mostly, Leo, because you missed this last week, I wanted to take a look at this very cool new concept in Captchas, which we've talked about, which are very important because you're wanting to basically prove that you're not a bot. And so the one place I know this is located, and I haven't looked at their source code to figure out where they got it, but it's MPE supportgroup.com, and it's their contact form, is protected by an animated CAPTCHA. And what's so cool and clever about it, and Tom and I discussed this last week, was that no single frame contains the image, but it's our mind, our brain, that is able to integrate across the animation that makes it very easy to read. I mean, much more. Some of these CAPTCHAs, I just say, I don't know what that is. I mean, I'm definitely not a bot, and I can't type that in correctly.
Yeah, no, but this is easy.
Yeah, isn't that neat?
But we've, of course, pointed out the CAPTCHAs really are kind of dumb because it doesn't matter how hard it is for a computer to read, because what the bad guys do is they set up porn sites with the same CAPTCHA.
have other people solving them for you.
And they have humans solving it at the rate of thousands of captchas a second. And that's all they need to do.
Yeah.
So I don't care how good you make that. If a human can't read it, then it's safe, but then it's no good. So there you go.
Yep. And I got a nice piece of listener feedback about my switch to DigiCert. You'll also remember that 2 weeks ago, Leo, there was a bit of a mystery because something seemed to have gone wrong with our SSL after I switched to DigiCert. And Lil, a.k.a. Dr. Mom, said that her organization had blacklisted GRC. It turns out they were using the WebSense provider, and that WebSense provides this kind of security where, because my SSL certificate was signed by someone else, that spooked them into flagging GRC as a possible security risk, which, in fact, it wasn't, more so than ever, because I had switched to EV certs. Well, the good news is that passed. Everything's okay again. But I did get a nice note from a Corbett Bush, who's a network engineer, who just said, Steve, I just got finished listening to you talk to Leo about your experience with DigiCert. Well, our SSL certs were due to expire, and I knew that I was not going back to Network Solutions. Last time, it took me weeks to get our wildcard cert from them converted so I could put it onto our firewalls, our 2 firewalls. Network Solutions, who we got them from, that is his SSL certs, refused to talk to me. So when you mentioned DigiCert several months back, I looked into them. Well, it only took me a few hours to get the new wildcard cert from them and apply it to 7 web servers and 3 firewalls. Thank you for recommending them. They are great. So there's some additional positive experience feedback I just wanted to share to cement it. I don't intend to become a DigiCert fanboy, but boy, I'm really, really pleased with the move I made.
Well done.
And speaking
As
of fanboy,
always, Steve,
there is a place I am a fanboy, and that's when it comes to Spinrite.
Well, it's your own product. You get to be a fanboy.
In mid-December, December 15th, I got a note from a Bob McKinstry who sent, by way of our sales email contact, he said, another Spinrite testimonial. He said, hey, Steve, I am a listener of Security Now since year 1 and a Spinrite owner. A few days ago, one of the residents in our training program asked how he could get help with his Dell laptop, as our IT department doesn't support machines they don't own. The story is classic. After a power outage, his laptop would not boot into Windows, and it would only blue screen, reboot, and rinse and repeat. Without hesitation, I told him about Spinrite. I lent him my trusty Spinrite CD, telling him he would need to purchase Spinrite if it did fix his machine, which is only fair, and that's okay. So he says, I told him he had to be patient and let the program do its work. He fired up Spinrite and went to bed. When he woke up in the morning, he was good to go just like that. Spinrite is a great product, another drive saved, another happy customer. Thanks for all you do with GRC, and thanks for all the great podcasts and that you've done with Leo on the Twit Network. Bob McKinstry, St. Louis, Missouri. So thanks very much, Bob.
Another happy customer. Thank you, Bob. Now, let me just briefly mention Netflix, and then we're going to get a little fun, little different kind of a show. We're going to talk a little bit about Sci-Fi, which I think is great. Steve has been a Sci-Fi fan since he was yay high.
Yep.
And as have I. But this is not my show, so we're going to hear Steve's recommendations. I've got pen and paper ready. You should get pen and paper ready, because I suspect there's going to be books that we want to listen to or read. Some people like to actually still read.
We old farts.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, it's funny. I was having dinner with a bunch of Abby's classmates, and so they're all, 19, 20. And I was shocked. They said how much they liked paper books, hardcovers. One of them is a true geek, a gamer, really a hardcore computer user. And he said, no, I really like having physical books. Not even Kindle, physical books.
And, you know, Leo, one thing occurred to me, which is you can keep reading them during takeoff and landing.
Yeah. There's another story there. Our friend Nick Bilton, who writes for the New York Times, has been doing some research. He took a Kindle to a lab where they test electronic emissions.
Ooh.
And they tested the Kindle, and I can't remember the number, but it was 0.0002 volts, something, 2 microvolts of emissions, which is so low.
Yeah.
It's lower. I mean, it's basically a zip. And which we know because the Kindle doesn't even when you're turning pages, it isn't really doing anything.
Correct.
But even turning pages, 0.000002 volts. So and then the response of somebody, I don't know, the FAA was, well, yeah, but if you have 100 of them, at which point Bill Ruck, who's an old friend of mine and a former radio chief engineer and RF expert, Nick called on him. And Ruck pointed out, as you know, and everybody who has any electronics background knows it, it's not a multiplier. 100 Kindles isn't 100 times 2 microvolts.
It would not be a coherent signal all summing together.
And in fact, because and of course, remember, American Airlines now allows iPads in the cockpit for pilots. And so they're saying, well, yeah, but they only have 2. What if everybody in the cabin had one? No, it doesn't work that way. So Nick is fighting a ridiculously hopeless, chaotic battle.
Good. I'm glad somebody is.
Yeah,
I'm all for him. Go, Nick.
Yeah, but he's not going to happen because it's
because they don't have to say yes.
They don't have to
say no.
They just say no. We're the FAA. Don't ask us. We just tell you. Anyway,
I'd like to find out what emissions a pacemaker puts out.
Well, that's the problem. And actually, Nick in his article says, electric shavers are legal. And they put out a huge amount of interference, as anybody who's ever stood by a radio shaving knows.
Right. Yeah, you can't hear the radio.
So, what? So I can shave during takeoff, but I can't read my Kindle. Please. Anyway, there's no point. Every time we talk about this, I get email, as you will, I'm sure, from pilots saying, well, we're not. Yeah. So what? You're the pilot. You get to say you can marry people in the plane as well. Whatever. You're the boss. I don't want the plane to go down because somebody was reading a Kindle. I understand that, but at the same time, it seems highly unlikely. Moving along to Netflix.com, folks, I got to tell you, Wallace and Gromit. I love Wallace and Gromit. Let's give them 5 stars. If you are not yet a customer of Netflix streaming, you're missing out on thousands of great movies, TV shows, all sorts of wonderful stuff that you could be watching if you just spent $7.99 a month for a Netflix streaming account. That's all it is. $8 a month for unlimited. No wonder 33% of all internet traffic during prime time is now Netflix streaming. No wonder. In fact, the point being that you're probably already all members. So tell Grandma and Grandpa when you go visit them and fix their WPS, tell them Netflix.com/twit. Sign up today. 1 month free. We watched Miracle on 34th Street for the holidays, and then it makes lots of suggestions of other movies you might want to watch. Classics. We missed this one, Bush Christmas.
What could that be?
I think it's in the Down Under. See, there's Ayers Rock.
Ah.
Anyway, I don't know. Netflix.com/ what could that be, says Steve? Netflix.com/twit. Give it a try today. We thank them for their support. And now it's time to go sci-fi with Steve Gibson.
Okay, so I wanted to mention just a couple movies that I've referred to in the past. Probably, I mean, there have been so many good sci-fi movies, but in terms of classics, I think one of my absolute all-time favorites is a movie called This Island Earth.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Oh, Leo, you have. I'm sure you've seen it. Yes,
I've seen it. I just don't remember it.
Yeah, what I love about it, and I referred to it once when we were talking about the ultra cap mega capacitor technology, because the beginning of the movie, there's sort of an IQ test for an engineer who figures prominently in the film. Wait a minute, I'm confusing.
1954.
There's This Island Earth, and
it says, when an alien in distress recruits American scientists Ruth and Cal to help him with an intergalactic battle against the evil Zagons, the Earthlings find themselves falling in love. And,
yep, that's the one.
And trapped in outer space.
and that's where the interocitor comes in, because he orders a replacement capacitor of some, like, many farads.
I think I have seen this.
And it comes, and it's this little tiny bead, and they're like,
supercapacitor.
Well, this can't possibly be a multi-farad, 10,000 volt capacitor. So his assistant says, I tested one, and it is. And so Cal Meacham, who's this scientist, says, no. So he sticks it on his meter and runs the voltage up, and sure enough, it gets kind of red hot, but it is doing what it's supposed to before it blows out. So there's like this catalog of interocitor parts, and he says, what's an interocitor? And so they say, well, it doesn't say, but here's how you build one. So he says, okay, order all the parts. I'm going to build one. And so he puts this thing together, and that puts him in touch with the aliens. Anyway, This Island Earth is just a great movie. If it doesn't ring any bell, then by all means. And I'm trying to think of the other one.
By the way, I got to point this out. Mystery Science Theater 2000, you know them, right? MSTK 3000.
Oh, they would have been a gold mine.
They have done it. They did it as a feature film.
Oh,
it's their only feature film, so you can probably get it on YouTube or Netflix. There is a clip on YouTube, which somebody's just sent me, called "Unpacking the Interocitor." So if you're an MST3K fan, who isn't?
Yep.
You can watch Joel and company dissect the interocitor. What fun!
Okay, the other must see is Forbidden Planet. This is the one where
classic Robbie the Robot.
Robbie the Robot and the Krell and Morbius, and the good news is, the word is James Cameron is going to remake it.
Oh, now see, that would be awesome in 3D, probably.
Leo.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, or 4 or 5. I don't care how many.
5D.
Oh my goodness. That anyway. It is if our listeners, again, if somehow they missed This Island Earth or they missed Forbidden Planet. In fact, Forbidden Planet just had its 50th anniversary like a couple years ago, because I purchased the 50th anniversary special tin box with a Robbie the Robot in it and other stuff. Anyway, that's probably my number one favorite sci-fi movie of all time. It is on
YouTube, so I'm guessing it's probably This Island Earth it's probably public domain, and that's, I'm sure, why Mystery Science Theater 3000 could do it. So you don't even have to get this on Netflix, which you can if you want the highest quality. But you could watch it on Vintage Video on Mevio.
Then, of course, we have The Day the World, or is it, wait, The Day the World stood still?
Earth.
The Day the Earth. The Earth.
Classic.
Yeah, I wrote World, but I know it's Earth, yes.
Klaatu
the original one.
Barada Nikto. That's right. They did remake that one. I never saw the remake. I didn't want to see it.
Yeah, I did, and it wasn't, because I'll see anything if it's got sci-fi like in it. I was like, okay, I got to see that. So, but again, yeah, The Day the Earth Stood Still, another just fantastic piece of work, which I've seen them all of these things multiple times, because it's not just about how it comes out at the end. It's just, great filmmaking.
Well,
and for what it's worth, Kurt Russell's version of The Thing was another just fantastic piece of science fiction. So
this is one. When you get to movies, this is when our chat room goes crazy, and has many suggestions. As do I. I can think of a lot of great science fiction movies.
Yeah.
That's a kind of, I know, you got to include The Matrix, maybe one of the best of all time.
Oh, again, yes.
Blade Runner, 2001.
Space Odyssey,
yeah.
right?
I mean, there's some classic Classic movies. And I guess we'd have to put...
And Pi is another great, sort of a wacky movie, but also very
Pi's good. Yeah, I like that's more recent. And people are going to yell at us. You can't leave out Star Wars.
Yeah, I know.
Or Star Trek. I personally would leave Star Wars out. I was in the theater yesterday, and they're going to re-release Episode 1 in 3D. And just the thought of Jar Jar Binks in 3D is just, I'm sorry, it's terrifying. I can't handle it.
Yeah. Okay, so for the sake of people who have not been reading sci-fi as long as I have, I mean, I know that we have a great younger listenership. Arguably one of the past masters of science fiction, the name will probably be well known to everyone, Isaac Asimov. Isaac is credited with and did invent the so-called 3 laws of robotics. The first law is a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. The second law is a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And the third law of robotics is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So he carefully thought out. If you imagine a future where you actually have powerful machines which could hurt people, how would you integrate those into society? What like fundamental, like hard wiring would you put in their brains, in their positronic brains, which is what Asimov had, that made them safe? And so these 3 laws is what he came up with. Well, there's a series of novels which are just fantastic. They're Isaac Asimov's robot novels. They're mysteries, so that they're not just, sci-fi. They are science fiction, but they are really, they're literature. They're really well-written mystery novels featuring a human detective, Elijah Bailey, and his robot sidekick, whose name is R. Daniel Oliva. So the 4 books are, the first one is The Caves of Steel, then The Naked Sun, The Robots of Dawn, and Robots and Empire.
Now, I think when you say the robotic rules, people think I, Robot, which was a short story.
Yes.
Was that the first mention of the laws? I think it might have been.
In fact, there's iRobot, and then I think that was packaged in a book of short stories,
right?
That were lots of different things. And I think you're right. I think the rules appeared in one of those stories,
and then he explored for I think maybe another 20 years. I don't know how long it took him to write these 4 robot books, but he explored the implications of all of that.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of my very favorite mechanisms for science fiction is where what happens is not just arbitrary, but where some set of clear limitations are imposed, and then the story is written against those. And so, exactly as you said, Leo, these 3 rules are used intrinsically in the fiction which Asimov created. And because he was a great writer and also a scientist and produced some really compelling books. They're science fiction in where they're in their settings and in what they do and how they do it, but just I can't recommend them highly enough. So and we should mention there are other Isaac Asimov books that anybody who wants to be well versed in science fiction has to read all of them. But the Foundation trilogy is brilliant. What would you recommend?
I'm going to ask you this each time, by the way, so prepare yourself. Let's assume nobody's read any of these, like my kids. You know, it's funny. I gave my son 2 books for Christmas, saying these are, in my opinion, the 2 must-read science fiction books to get you started. One was Heinlein's. I want to. It's not The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. The other one, and anyway,
A Stranger in a Strange Land.
In a Strange Land.
Yep.
And I wanted to get him into modern sci-fi, so I gave him William Gibson's Neuromancer, and I thought those 2 would get you started. But now, if you were like my son, what would you be the first Asimov book you'd read? Childhood's End.
Boy, that's tough.
That is tough.
I mean, the Caves.
That's
of
Arthur C.
Steel,
Clarke. I wouldn't say that. Caves of Steel. Yeah.
The Caves of Steel is so good, and for me, I mean. And we know that, I mean, we're going to see a bias in the next half hour as I go through this, because I like investing in something and then having that investment pay off.
We know that about you. You're an in-depth kind of guy. Deep, not shallow.
And so, you know, much as I invested in learning JavaScript this year, and look what happened. You know, we got all kinds of cool JavaScript things. We got, you know.
And we should also mention that you are a hard sci-fi lover. I think we should probably say that right up front. That you don't like fantasy, swords. You don't like.
I don't know why unicorns are in the same aisle.
So this, you know, everything you're going to get here today, and I'm with you, by the way, is hard sci-fi, and by that we mean real science, lots of it.
Yes,
it could be made up science, like that supercapacitor. Although it turns out that maybe that's not so made up nowadays.
Not so much, yeah.
But I think that there's a reason why hard science sci-fi is important. I think almost every scientist I've ever talked to, and I ask them this frequently, says that they were influenced in the kinds of research they did by sci-fi, particularly by hard sci-fi. And so, in a way, it's inventing the future.
Well, and we've seen how often scientists, I mean, science fiction authors are predicting where we're headed.
That'd be my position. They're not predicting, they're leading.
Yeah.
The scientists of tomorrow are reading sci-fi today and getting inspired to build. The one exception is flying cars. Everything else, they're trying to build. And maybe, who knows, maybe they're trying to build flying cars too.
Yeah, and Leo, you know, given the trouble we have with malware and viruses and things, I'm no longer a big fan of flying cars.
Maybe
I just think it would be a flying disaster.
Anyway, I didn't make. Sorry for the digression, but I did want to qualify what you're going to hear today.
No, and I think for you and me discussing this is a lot of the value that we have for our listeners. So, you know, by all means, one of my other favorite older school books, though not as old as Asimov, is, and we've talked about this before, is Larry Niven's book titled Protector.
Yeah, that's a wonderful book.
Oh gosh, and one of the things I also like about these books, and Asimov's robot novels have it, and Protector does, and so does one that Niven co-wrote with Jerry Pournelle, which is The Mote in God's Eye. Another great one is, I love it when I'm surprised. I love it when the author, and sure, this is contrived, but you know, that's their right. And as the reader, I'm looking for something fun and that I didn't expect, instead of just sort of a documentary. I don't want that. I mean, that's okay, but I'd rather have like something that I didn't expect. And Protector is one of the best examples of that, where you're going along and the story is interesting, you're engrossed and engaged, but you didn't expect what's coming. Yeah. And bang, it hits you, and suddenly everything changes. I mean, it fits together, but it's like you're turned upside down in what you were, in the model that you were building in your mind when some additional facts come together. And it's a great story, not super long, so you know, it won't tie you up forever, but I really do recommend it. If you haven't read Larry Niven's Protector, It's really good, and I've read it a couple times.
Another footnote.
Yep.
First of all,
And-
don't worry about
good.
spoilers because Steve is not going to give you spoilers, I can guarantee you.
I never do.
He's
Yep.
really good about that. So people in the chat room saying, oh, I'm covering my ears. Don't worry, he won't.
Nope.
But I will say this about Protector, which I love, and I love Larry Niven. It is old sci-fi, and sometimes when you read older sci-fi, it feels a little dated. Protector and all of Heinlein's books, for instance, Heinlein's books are really sexist. Protector, it just feels like it was written in the 50s. And so it's important to read these books, I think, but don't be put off by remember when it was written 30 or 40 years ago. So I think Protector is one of the best books, but I also think you must read Ringworld.
Yeah, good point. Ringworld is classics. Classics.
And
sci-fi.
Ringworld is an example of what you were talking about, which is start with a premise. I think all the best sci-fi does this. Then explore, then expand based on the premise. And Ringworld's a perfect example of that. What if aliens built a Ringworld? And I'll leave it at that. What would happen? And then I think what happens with Larry and other great authors is they just go. They say that's the starting line. Go.
Yep.
So I would throw in Ringworld as another great recommendation.
And also the Mode in God's Eye is another.
Oh, yes.
It's a collaboration of Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. Jerry, whom you
also
had
feels
on.
dated, by the way.
Yep.
So just remember that when you read these. Remember, you're reading the classics.
Yep. And speaking of classics, there is a series that I really liked also when I was now I almost ought to reread one to see how I feel about it now, but they are the Berserker novels by Fred Saberhagen or Saberhagen. They're novels and short stories. The one thing that I think of that's more contemporary was one of the original Star Trek episodes, Kirk and Spock and McCoy Star Trek, the first iteration of Star Trek. It was an episode that was titled The Doomsday Machine.
Oh, yeah.
And it was this long cone-shaped thing that was going around killing stuff. And it was a berserker. Anyway, the point is that the mythology behind these berserkers is that no one really knows where they came from. It's posited that ancient alien races built them to automate their war against each other, and that presumably the biological aliens got wiped out, but the machines, being machines, and also being sentient to different degrees and able to repair themselves, they kept on. So, and the bad news is, maybe their programming got altered by, a cosmic ray that zapped and flipped a bit or something. Who knows? But what we have in these novels are very competent killing machines. And what I remember of them, and I mean, I loved them a lot, was, again, really well-written, really clever, really interesting stories set in this future where biological life, we humans, are out in space and encountering these machines that for no reason whatsoever want to kill us, because that's the way they're programmed. And some of them are old and decrepit. Some of them are new. So, I mean, there's a huge spectrum of treatments of just from this basic kernel of a concept, a machine designed to kill biological life. All these amazing stories come from it.
Yeah.
So again, if it's something that you've missed,
Peter F. Hamilton used that premise for Pandora's Star, right?
Yeah,
in a way.
Actually, yeah, a different one. There, it was that not all life has to be like ours.
Right.
That it would be possible. He gave us a compelling backstory for how mechanical life could actually evolve.
And have no regard for biological life.
Absolutely, just that's in the way. Yeah,
right.
That, those stinky biological life forms. Yeah.
Anyway, but so I haven't, it's funny, I have not read these Fred Saberhagen
Oh,
novels.
Leo. I mean, they're old. I don't know if they would have been audibleized.
They are.
But,
I'm looking at them. They're all on Audible.
Ooh.
By the way, I'm showing another footnote for those watching on video. I will, from time to time, show the titles that Steve's mentioning on Audible.com. So far, all of them, except for unaccountably the fourth robot novel. They've only done 3 of the 4, and I think that's probably because they're doing Audible. We should mention Audible, longtime sponsor of this show and all of the Twit Network, has a science fiction branch called Frontiers, where they're recording for the first time in many cases the audiobooks of the classics. So my suspicion is because they were never, nobody when these came out. I mean, nobody. I don't know who it was, Tor or whoever published the Berserkers in the first place, thought that anyone would want audio versions. So they didn't have the money, and they didn't do it. So Audible, because they are sci-fi fans, and I know this for a fact, when I first started with Audible in 2000, there were very few sci-fi novels because nobody recorded these. They built 9 studios in their Newark offices, and they've been recording like madmen ever since. And now there are thousands of titles, including all of these Berserkers, on audio, modern recordings of them, which I think is fantastic.
Well, there are so many books which I can assert are really good. So, I mean,
I know
our listeners have their homework cut out for them.
The other thing I would say before you go on is that, and thanks to Strength in the chat room for pointing this out, of course, most of these are also available on Kindle. And if you're an Amazon Prime member, they've made many of the classic sci-fis available for free to Prime members. So if you go to Kindle eBooks and Science Fiction, there's 21,000 plus results there, but many of them are free to Prime members. So if you've been thinking, I don't know if I want to spend millions of dollars on all of these things that Steve is recommending, lots of them are available for Kindle for free, which is really
So I can, without reservation, I can say, try one of the Berserker novels.
Yeah.
These Fred Saberhagen, and see if they hook you, because I still have mental imagery from some, and it's been 30 or 40 years since I don't know, maybe not 40.
Have to try these. And they Berserkers the Beginning is available both on Audible and in paperback on Amazon, and it's not on the Kindle. Which is so
not surprised.
So strange. Well, it's so
old. Do you have a date?
It says 1998, but that's not right.
No.
That's when this paperback was published.
Yeah.
I don't know what the original date is. I'm sure the chat room will provide this momentarily for me. I think it's odd that there's no Kindle version of that.
There is a whole Wikipedia page on the Berserker
well, good.
novels.
I haven't read any of these. I'm adding them to my list.
They really are. They're
awesome.
It's just, again, people will know what I mean more maybe when they encounter it, but they're just such clever stories around the concept. And there's something, I guess it's one of the hooks that Peter Hamilton used with Pandora's Star, because these are, machines that have no remorse, no conscience, don't care about us at all.
And why should they? I mean, we assume that aliens would be like us, but no, of course not. They don't have to be.
Yeah, so they're as alien as you could want anything to be, and so it creates an emotional, power that there's this machine that just doesn't want to leave you alone. It's pissed off that you exist. So it's like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, actually, in the Hamilton, it's not even pissed off. It's just it doesn't have any
nope, no conscience, no
feeling,
no ethics, no morality. No. It's just
we want that. We're going to take it. Sorry,
right.
Bye. Not even sorry. See ya. 1963. Let's see. The first Berserker was written in 65, I think.
Wow. Okay. So
that's how old those are. Yeah.
Yep. I was 10 years old.
But he continued to write them for 20 years
They're so good, Leo. They're so good.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
again, I wanted to go back in time a little bit to help our listeners flesh out some of this background, some of the classic stuff, which is just spectacular.
Okay, before you move on from classics, though, can I throw in a couple?
Please.
I mentioned Heinlein already. You got to read Heinlein. Stranger in a Strange Land is like considered by many the greatest sci-fi of all time. I think it's dated now, but I think you got to read it. We didn't mention Philip K. Dick. I don't know how you feel about him.
Well, I think Philip K. Dick is a spectacular author, and he did many short stories which have been turned into movies.
Right.
I mean,
we don't
that's
really have to
what
tell
Blade Runner-
people. Yeah, we don't have to tell people about him anymore because he's being discovered by Hollywood.
Right.
So,
the movie Screamers was also based on a Philip K. Dick short story.
oh, so many. Minority
Yeah.
Report. I mean, I can go on and on and on. The Blade Runner is based on Do androids dream of electric sheep?
Cheap. Yep.
That's a must read. This just in from Jammer B, who is apparently also a sci-fi crazed fellow, as we all are. He mentions the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. Yeah, that's a short story. Most of Dick's stuff is short stories. There's one he wrote, and I can't remember the name of it, where advertising is everywhere. Eldritch is a novel? Okay. That's a classic. And the Man in the High Castle, which is maybe not your cup of tea, Steve, because it's a revisionist history novel. Philip K. Dick was a big idea guy. That's why movies love him. And again, not hard sci-fi, so maybe doesn't belong on your list, but I agree with Jammer B. We've got to include Dune.
Oh, yeah.
But that's not hard sci-fi by any means. That's a fantasy novel. So we'll leave that out.
Yeah, but good, but good
Good.
sci-fi.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted another footnote, sorry. And I'm sure we're leaving stuff out. So
a huge author that we've talked about often, huge in many senses, not physically large, but the novels that he produces, Peter F. Hamilton.
love him.
And
He's a modern guy. I think he's one of the giants of modern sci-fi, hard sci-fi.
I think so. And boy, he started in the mid-'90s with a psychic detective who was named Greg Mandel, and the books are or were out of print. I remember hearing someone say that they were coming back. In fact, I remember hearing myself say it because I ran across it being said or being written somewhere. But he's got Mind Star Rising, A Quantum Murder, and The Nano Flower, which is that was my introduction to Peter Hamilton back then, back in the mid-'90s when this was beginning to happen. That is when he was beginning to happen. Then, of course, he did the Night's Dawn trilogy, which people went nuts over. It's huge, epic space opera, 1.2 million words in the books. They are huge, 3 huge hardbacks, or they're broken down into 6 large paperbacks. It lost me a little bit, Leo, because it slipped away from hard sci-fi. You know, I mean, when you've got dead people coming back, it's like, okay.
Yeah, I agree. Al Capone killed that novel for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he spent a little too much time on that stuff, and it's like, okay. I loved the sci-fi portions of it, and there are some great characters in there. But it was like, okay, it's nothing I would read again.
I agree. And very long. He likes to write, which is why we recommend Fallen Dragon as the starting point, right?
I was just going to say that, exactly that. If someone wants a beautiful introduction to Peter Hamilton, I've read Fallen Dragon, I think 3 times now. Just, again, I'm that way. Even though I know what the story is, if a writer really does a beautiful job of painting imagery for me, it's like, I'm ready to read that again. So, I mean, for the experience. So Fallen Dragon absolutely. And then, Pandora's Star, which is the first of two. It's and the sequel, the finishing of that story that we mentioned of a mechanistic thing which creates itself on a planet and then hampers us is Judas Unchained. So Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained.
Both Steve and I had the great misfortune of reading Pandora's Star before Hamilton had finished Judas Unchained.
I knew you were going to say that, Leo. Yes.
We were left hanging. No!
What happened?
So, read Fallen Dragon. If you like that, then Pandora's Star. And then leave. I think you could actually ignore The Dreaming Void entirely.
The whole Void trilogy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad. I think he's a brilliant. Unlike many of these guys, he's actually, I think, a very accomplished writer in the craft of fiction.
Yes.
Sci-fi is not always well written in that sense. Characters are sometimes, Heinlein's a good example. Characters are paper thin, but you read them for the ideas, for the inspiration, for the excitement, for the plot.
Yep.
Hamilton you can read for the characters, for the descriptions. It's beautiful stuff.
Oh, and Pandora's Star is Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained. They create what is known as the Commonwealth, where this is the far future, where you've got regeneration, people's consciousness living on for hundreds and in fact thousands of years. Fantastic characterizations that he does, but again, long and although I'd really thought Pandora's Star was really
well worth
good.
it. Yeah, I'd just say stick with those two. That's three books that's going to keep it going for a while.
Oh goodness, yes, because he doesn't write anything short.
Right. Well, Fallen Dragon is one, and by the way, unfortunately, not on Audible, which I'm sure they're going to record it because they have all of the Void trilogy and Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained.
Yeah, they'll probably just
they're getting there.
Catch up.
Working up to it.
So another very different author, but one of my favorites, who I have mentioned many times, is Michael McCollum. He is actually a rocket scientist. He designed a pump that's on the International Space Station. He replaced some of the problems at Chernobyl, and he's an aerospace engineer. Despite that fact, he's also a great storyteller. And he has a website, Sci-Fi-AZ, SCIFI-AZ.com. And I know from our correspondence, because in fact I edited the last of his Gibraltar series books, because I'm a very slow and careful and methodical reader. And what I was doing was, as I was reading previous books of his in e-format, I would just mark up, I think it's when I was reading on the Palm Pilot of all things, or one of the the T3, I think it was. It was very easy to just make a highlight and save it into a file. So I would send him my file of little typos that I would find. And so he finally said, okay, I give up. I'm going to let you, read
edit these.
Yeah, edit these. So he's got a couple multi-book series which are also at the top of my list. I would not call them literature in the sense that Hamilton almost qualifies as a literary creator, but oh my goodness, they are fun. It's absolute hard sci-fi, tons of new ideas. And so there's something called the Antares series, which are 3 books: Antares Dawn, Antares Passage, and Antares Victory. And from his own side, I just snipped this so I could share it to give you a sense for the introduction. He says, this is again not a spoiler. This is his little brief sort of intro to the book. He said, when the supergiant star Antares exploded in the year 2512, the human colony on Alta found their pathway to the stars gone, isolating them from the rest of human space for more than a century. Then one day, a powerful warship materialized in the system without warning. Alarmed by the sudden appearance of such a behemoth, the commanders of the Alton Space Navy dispatched one of their most powerful ships to investigate. What the ASNS Discovery finds when they finally catch the intruder is a battered hulk manned by a dead crew. That is disturbing news for the Altons, for the dead battleship was so powerful that it could easily have defeated the entire Alton Navy. If it could find Alta, then so could whoever it was that beat it. Something would have to be done. So what Michael creates here is an interstellar travel technology that is based on gravity wells created by stars. So when this Antares star exploded, the mapping that they had done, or the throughways through hyperspace that were all about gravity wells of stars, the loss of this star scrambled all of their mapping, and they were stranded. And something else happened at some point that recreated some throughways. And anyway, it's just, again, it is really good storytelling, and a little bit of romance. He always throws some in, which is kind of fun. Some, on the human interest side, but just lots of great story in there. And so there's that trilogy, the Antares Dawn, Antares Passage, and Antares Victory. I recommend without question. And I've also mentioned and recommended, because it was happening with us during this podcast, the Gibraltar series that Michael created, Gibraltar Earth, Gibraltar Sun, and Gibraltar Stars. There he has he posits a really interesting situation where by mistake we discover that we're not alone. At the point where the books begin, we're beginning to colonize. Our radio bubble is expanding at light speed, which of course is the term for the electromagnetic energy that the Earth has been producing ever since I Love Lucy was being beamed out on television and so forth. So that's expanding. We suddenly discover that by some coincidence we have not come to the attention of an incredibly powerful but also incredibly xenophobic race, which wouldn't be happy at all to know that we're here in its backyard. And so this isn't a concept I had seen before, and what Michael does with it is just fabulous. So again, that's the Gibraltar series. And then he has a number of standalone novels, The Sales of Tau Ceti, a book called Life Probe, and Procyon's Promise. So anyway, I've never read anything he's done that has disappointed me. Also, they're available in every conceivable ebook format. He is selling them on Amazon, so you can get them for the Kindle. He is selling them on his own website, and they are not copy protected, which, here's someone who more than anyone I can suggest is owed the money that you would pay for his books. But it's nice to know that you can buy them once, get them in every format, stick them on, somewhere safe on a thumb drive, and they are future-proof. Because these, if you're a person like me who likes to reread things, I just can't recommend them enough. It's again, great sci-fi.
Highly agree.
Now, the Lost Fleet series by Jack Campbell, Campbell. I've mentioned these because I read them during the podcast's life, and they are also really good. And I know from the feedback I've received from our listeners that who have followed the recommendation, they've loved them. They're another really interesting concept. Here in the future, humanity has been sort of split into two halves that are at war. And by a fluke, the life pod, and this is not giving anything away, that you get this in the first few pages of the first book, the life pod containing an old warrior is found. And this Captain John Geary is resuscitated near death but brought back to life. And it turns out that by a fluke, he ends up in, well, he's the most senior officer they have because he received his commission hundreds of years before. And they go by, the date of commission. So he uses that in order to get command at a time that's necessary. What's wonderful about these, and people with a really good memory will remember this, because I've mentioned this before, is we're dealing with huge fleet engagements where he's configuring the physical layout of fleets which are meeting each other in space battles. All of these writers are careful to impose very clearly explained limits on their technology. So, for example, Michael McCullum is faithful to speed of light problems and comes up with drive technology which coherently fits the story really well. Jack Campbell does the same thing there. I remember as I was reading these, really getting an appreciation for how daunting it is to operate in planetary size space if you don't have just faster than light technology at your fingers, but you got to spend all this time accelerating your ships and then turning them around and decelerating them. But anyway, he's got a series of they're called the Lost Fleet series. Dauntless, fearless, courageous, valiant, relentless, and victorious, which are just they're really nice reads. Not super long, but really great. And he started now another series of 2. Dreadnought follows on from that, and then Invincible is another one which will be coming later this year. So those 2 will be following the original Lost Fleet series, and they're just spectacular. So the last author that I've mentioned before, I'm a little hesitant because the 5th book is not finished. The author is Graham Sharp Paul, who creates a character named Michael Helfort, Helfort. And the series is Helfort's War. We are introduced to Michael as he's graduating from the equivalent of Starfleet, from whatever Star Academy this is. And I assumed that the series was finished, but it's not. I thought that book 4 was the end, but we only got sort of half of book 4, and I'm still waiting for 5. So it might be something that you'll want to wait for until you hear from me that we're finished. But I really did enjoy the books. They were also really good. And I will finish with where I currently am. I've mentioned these a couple times. I'm now in book 10 of the Honor Harrington series by David Weber. He has something collectively known as the Honor Verse, which is his very large science fiction, future humanity, which is really good. However, I have to say that they're maybe a little too political. I like politics, and even someone who likes politics is thinking, okay, come on, let's get on with this. We're spending a little too much time here. I want a little more space, battle, and action. The beginning of them, up through book 7, I thought was really good. I mean, I remember telling people. I mean, I was choked up reading the these books in several places. They're just very powerful, and I'm a sucker for, duty and honor and sort of the whole military ethics stuff, which these are steeped in. But he's in going for 12 books, which is what the whole series encompasses. We end up he broadens them out, creating a world that is very complex, and in order to keep everything knit together, he gets into a lot of detail, and my sense is they're accurate in as much as, yes, all of the things he's talking about had to happen and have to happen, but it's a little, by book 10, it's like, okay, it's seeming a little long. So it is not the case that anything is unfinished, whereas some of these, you really, for example, the Lost Fleet series, you need to get through the end of the 6th book in order to get the end of it. With the Honor Harrington series, you would be fine if you went for half of them and just said, okay, I've had enough. I'm really glad I'm reading them, but they fall a little bit short of my enthusiastic, recommendation without any equivocation at all, because it is dragging a little bit at this point by book number 10. But for everything else, wow. I recommend everything wholeheartedly.
All right. But chat room's loving this. One of the reasons I know this is a great subject is because it stimulates conversation. Everybody has their favorite, right? And
yes.
So people are throwing in their favorites. I'm going to throw in a couple.
Good.
First of all, one that I've not read, but Jammer B has been saying, if Steve likes Big, which we know Steve does, he says you've got to read, and I think one of the reasons you haven't is because it's not available electronically, the Tad Williams Otherland series. And I haven't read these either, but I see them in the bookstore all the time. If you browse Sci-Fi, you can't miss them because they occupy so much shelf space. But he says they're great, but not Kindle and not Audible. So that, for me, is a disadvantage.
So it's called Otherland.
Otherland by Tad Williams. He says it's a big series, and he takes off on the metaverse concept. And if we're going to say metaverse, I mentioned already William Gibson's Neuromancer. You got to mention Neil Stephenson and Snow Crash. One of the great. If Neil has a problem with finishing books. So sometimes, and this is not unusual in all kinds of authorship, but the big books, sometimes they trail off at the end, and Neil's notorious for that. Snow Crash, a good example. But the first chapter of Snow Crash, if you read nothing else, if you haven't read the first, go to the bookstore and just pick it up and read the first chapter and put it back. You got to read that. Especially if you just got to read it. And you probably will continue.
If you're able to put it back, then it's just
it's not good.
But you probably won't be able to.
When we were talking classics, I briefly accidentally mentioned Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, but you've got to read Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah.
And Childhood's End is in a category of sci fiction that I love, it's hard science, twist ending. And I love the big twists. And as long as we're mentioning big twists, Childhood's End is one. I don't think that spoils it to say that there's a surprise.
No.
The other is Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game.
Yep.
Wonderful book. Yep. There's a whole series of mixed value, but you've got to read Ender's Game.
Yeah, and there again, that's one where it's just a great concept.
Yeah.
You just need to be exposed to the whole Ender's Game concept. Really interesting.
Now, we condition this at the beginning saying it's hard science. So, of course, you didn't mention two that the chat room loves. Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned it. You're right. But
It's
oh
not
my
sci-
God, it's the funniest
funny.
stuff I have ever read in my life.
So
I mean,
a separate category.
Cleverly funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that actually started not as a novel, but as a radio show. He wrote the radio show, then novelized it. And
Yeah.
if you're interested in funny sci-fi / fantasy, Terry Pratchett's Discworld series is very, very funny and very, very good. And then I'm going to throw in, but we've been talking about, and of course, what's nice about sci-fi is there are a lot of new guys and gals writing sci-fi and taking it in very exciting and interesting directions. Steve has mentioned a few. I like one, and I don't know if you've ever, this is real hard science. Stephen Baxter, have you ever read any of his stuff?
Oh, yeah, of course. All of his time series.
Time series, yeah.
Yep.
And I liked Evolution, which isn't really sci-fi, but it's a fascinating book in which he begins at the beginning of life and continues through the end of the galaxy in one novel.
Whoa.
There's not much plot, but it's an exercise, I think, in brilliance.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called Evolution. And we've
There's a
left
book
out
called-
many.
Oh, I know. I mean, there's a book called Eon. I think Eon was written by Greg Bear.
It's wonderful.
If I remember.
In fact, it's funny that you should say that because I love Greg Bear's stuff.
Yes.
And I was going to mention him. Some of his stuff is not hard sci. Some of it is. I think he's one of the best current practitioners. Mm-hmm. I love his stuff. He wrote,
Also, I skipped Gregory Benford, who is a renowned physicist and astrophysicist. I did read during the last couple of years the Galactic Center saga, which is another organic versus machine story. Some really good novels, amazing characterization. I mean, I have the characters he created in my head. I mean, they stay with you. In the Ocean of Night, Across the Sea of Stars, The Great Sky River, Tides of Light, Furious Gulf, and Sailing Bright Eternity is his Galactic Center saga, which takes us also from Earth to the center of the galaxy, which is what made me think of it when you're talking about the entire life of the galaxy.
And talking about scientists who write great sci-fi, and we've mentioned this before. I know you like his stuff. David Brin, and the Uplift series, amazing.
Yep.
So what's great news is, if you're interested in sci-fi, there's a huge selection. You've got to read the classics, which we've mentioned, and then you'll find that there are modern practitioners who are taking it to the next level in many ways. And of course, you got to read William Gibson and Neuromancer, especially. Which Neuromancer for me was like Matrix. When I saw the Matrix movie, I went out of there thinking my world has changed. And when I read Neuromancer, I felt the same thing. Just really, really brilliant stuff. So wow, we've given people probably 80 years worth of reading between the two of us.
Yeah,
Lots of fun.
good stuff.
I'm so glad we did this. Yes, Audible does have all of Orson Scott Card's stuff, including Ender's Game. Ender's Game you'll like. Ender's Game is what turned my son on to sci-fi because it's about a kid.
Yep, exactly.
And a kid who, I think it's safe to say, saves the universe. So, is that a spoiler? Maybe I've done that. I shouldn't say that. But it's fascinating. And that turned Henry on. And then he went on to read, and this is sci-fi as well in a modern fashion, Daniel Suarez's books, Demon and Freedom TM, both of which you loved, I know, and are brilliant.
Yep.
So, wow.
There it is.
We have to stop.
Big reading list.
Really, really great stuff. Steve, this year and every year, I just, one of the things I'm so grateful for is a chance to do this show with you. Your friendship, too, which has always been just cherished by me. I want to thank you for a great year of great shows. And all I can say is we all look forward to Security Now in 2012.
Well, and we already have a backlog of topics. We got...
What a surprise. You thought when we started this show 6 years ago, oh, we'll never be able to go for more than a year. We'll run out of material. Nuh-uh.
Yep.
Nuh-uh.
No. And it's funny, too, because I ran across somewhere, maybe it's on the page, But we had this concept of a quick 20-minute synopsis of what happened during the week. And I know that the early podcasts were very short compared to we normally run about 90 to 100 minutes or so. Yeah. And with, never a stop. So, yes, I think there's no end in sight, as they say.
And we plan. We won't make the show longer, I don't think. But we plan.
It would just exhaust ourselves.
But thank you for all the hard work you put into this show.
Always a pleasure, and it's great working with you, Leo. I really enjoy it, and look forward to many more years.
Do go back to our backlog, our back catalog of 333 episodes now, all on Steve's site in 16 kilobit versions. He's also made transcriptions available, which is fantastic. So if you listen to this and say, I missed, in a couple of days, Elaine will have transcribed it, and you'll be able to go and search through all of them and cut and paste the stuff you want. That's all at his website, grc.com, where he also publishes Spinrite, the world's finest hard drive maintenance and recovery utility, and lots of free stuff, tons of free stuff, including the legendary Shields Up to test your router. Now you got one more test to throw in there. Turn off WPS.
Yes.
You also can find video versions as well as audio versions on our site, twit.tv, going back 333 episodes. Thank you, Steve.
We'll remind people that next week is a Q&A episode, so grc.com/feedback. Send me anything you want to. We love your name and where you're located so we can let people know who's listening and where they are. And we will entertain questions. And then in 2 weeks, going to plow into how it is that a fault was found in a protocol that all of our routers, our wireless routers, probably have enabled by default, which allows a bad guy to get in on only a couple hours.
Wow.
Not good.
Wow. Steve Gibson, grc.com. Have a great New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and we will see you next Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on twit.tv.
Yay. Thanks, Leo.
Security now.